Capex versus Opex analysis. One of the ways to reduce cost is simply to replace Opex with Capex. In this section, we will discuss how to do it. You will learn how to analyze such situation and pick optimal option. Before we look at the process how to achieve that, a few information what we mean by Capex and Opex. So by Capex, we actually mean capital expenditure, in other words, investments, and we do them to build new assets or maintain existing ones. You have to bear in mind that Capex investments are obviously done to last many years. So in many cases, they will be more expensive and they will require bigger cash outflow in the very beginning, but afterwards they prove to be cheaper. By Opex, we mean operational expenses, operational costs, and we can divide them in two ways. So one way is to divide them by type. So for example, we've got materials, labor, social security, external services, depreciation, cost of goods and materials sold, taxes and others. Or you can define them by stages, where we would in most cases have defined cost of goods sold, selling and marketing costs, R&D costs, general administration costs and other costs. So this is in short what we mean Capex. So in other words, Capex are investment and Opex are operational expenses, operational costs. To show you how this sort of Capex versus Opex analysis work, let's have a look at a short example. So imagine that you have to dig 100 holes in the ground as a part of a preparation for a new investment. To achieve that, you can consider two options. In the first option, you would mainly use people. So it would be requiring huge Opex, operational expenses. The first assumption show us that we will have to have 12 people for that, and obviously we have to buy them shovels. In the second option, we can actually buy or rent a digger, and in this case we would only require 2 people. Obviously this option is more Capex heavy, so we would be rather spending a lot on the digger and less on the people. So the same effect we can use using the first option, where we just put a lot of people to work, or in the second option where there is digger and the operators to do that in a less labor-intensive work. What is better, so is it the first option or the second option, will really depend on certain parameters that we have to consider, and it's not really always that obvious which option will be a better one. Therefore, we need a process how to approach this sort of a Capex versus Opex analysis, and let's have a look how you can do that. So the first stage usually is about defining what you want to improve. So here you have to understand what are the driving costs of the current solution or the problem you have to solve. And obviously you have to measure the cost. After that, you define possible options to achieve the goal. And in our case, these were the 2 options we have discussed. Usually when we are defining possible options, we would have one option which is Capex heavy, so it requires a lot of investments, and another one which is more Opex heavy, so it requires more operational costs and less capital expenditures, less investments. In the third stage, after defining the potential options, you have to estimate the costs and the investment required, and you have to try to estimate what will be the impact on your company within a certain period of time. I would say that least period that you can use is the 3 years, although usually we would look at 5-year or 10-year perspective. As we said, for every option you should estimate in details the Capex and Opex, and usually you would calculate the net present value as well as the internal rate of return for every option. And those would be, in most of the cases, the most important criteria you would be using to decide which option is the best one. So after the estimation done for every option, obviously comes the stage where you have to pick which option you should implement. And here it is extremely important to define what we mean by best option. Is it just option which gives you better net present value? Or maybe you add some other criteria. If you add more criteria, obviously you should somehow rank them. So here you would have to create some sort of a ranking for those options. And the last step is simply to implement the selected option. If the investment is more complicated, I would strongly advise to implement it in stages. So start by implementing the solution in part of the organization. And if you get results close to your estimation, you can implement it in the rest of the organization. So to sum up, you have to first define what you want to improve, define possible options, estimate Capex and Opex for every option, pick the best option, and finally implement the selected option preferably in stages, so you can see whether the estimation that you have made can be achieved, proven in reality or not.